Hey, I'm Rowena. So I took a train, 12 hours straight through a blizzard, to surprise my parents for their 40th anniversary. And guess what? I walked in on something I should never have heard. My husband, Silas, laughing, making fun of me. That was just the start of it. It turned out the guy I loved had been totally screwing me over, financially and emotionally, for years. Ever been totally betrayed by someone you thought you could trust completely? Man, it was rough. After almost 12 hours on that awful train, battling that crazy storm from Providence to Springfield, I got off, feeling like a popsicle. The wind at the station was brutal, like a punch to the face. It went right through my coat, I swear. My fingers were numb as could be. I was holding this cake, my hands were shaking. I don't know if it was from the cold or just nerves. I was barely hanging on. But even though I was wiped out, I still had this little bit of hope inside me, something precious. It was my parents' 40th anniversary. 40 years, that's love, forgiveness, all the hard times, and the secrets they kept from each other. And they made it. I'd seen them get through so much tough times with money, tough emotional stuff, and they never let each other go. I wanted to honor that, so I decided to surprise them a day early. I hadn't been home in a long time. Things with Silas, well, things were complicated. It happened so slow, the drift between us, I didn't even see it coming until dinner felt longer than the silence. So I figured maybe hanging around love that lasts would jog my memory. I didn't tell a soul I was coming. Not mom and dad, not Silas, definitely not Silas. He claimed he was meeting his brother Grant that weekend anyway, or so he said. My ride couldn't make it up the hill, the streets weren't plowed, so I walked the last couple blocks, my boots crunching in the new snow. The air was this weird mix of cold metal and pine trees. It felt like I was a ghost drifting through my old neighborhood. The porch light was on when I got there. Warm yellow light spilled out the kitchen window, making long shadows across the driveway. For a second I actually smiled. Home. I used my old key to slip in the side door, quiet as a mouse, careful not to drop the cake. I'd gotten it special ordered from that bakery Mom always went on and on about. My plan. Sneak in, put the cake down, and yell surprise. It was the kind of thing she'd talk about for weeks, something small but sweet. But the second I stepped inside, this wave of warmth hit me, and then I heard them. Laughter, not my parents' voices, not quiet family stuff. It was deep, careless, masculine laughter. Silas and Grant. I froze in the hallway, clutching the cake box. I was about to yell when I heard my name. She still thinks anniversaries are a big deal, Silas said, all low and chuckle. Why he actually thinks bringing a cake over is some big romantic move, Grant sneered. What a clueless sap. She eats that crap up, man. You got her wrapped around your finger, just keep stringing her along. I froze, couldn't make a peep. Their words seeped under the door like acid. She's a loyal one, Silas added, his voice getting harsher. That's the key. She'll forgive you for anything as long as you put on a good enough show, just keep chipping away at her. I thought I had you wrong, Grant said. If she ever figures out what you're really up to, just say you're stressed. Turn it back on her. She's probably already blaming herself anyway. Then the sound that shattered me, their laughter, sharp and mean, bouncing off the walls. My name, a joke in a place I thought was safe. I looked down at the cake box. My arms went numb. It slipped, hitting the wood floor with a sickening thud. I didn't even register the mess. What I heard was the sudden quiet in the kitchen, then footsteps, soft, unsure, but I didn't stick around. I just walked back out the way I came, snow pouring into my boots. My feet just carried me. I didn't make a scene, I didn't yell, I didn't even cry. I just walked through the blizzard hoping it would erase everything that just happened. It didn't. The snow came down harder, soaking through my jeans. I passed the park where I used to ride my bike when I was little, the church with the tilted steeple. My head was spinning, going over every single thing Silas had ever done, seeing it all differently now. All his dodging, all the times he wasn't around. And all those times I said sorry, even though I had no clue what I'd done wrong. I ended up at a dive bar way out of town, one of those places with those cheesy flickering neon signs and that smell of stale cigarettes everywhere. I paid cash, of course, and signed the guest book with some fake name I hadn't used since college. Back in the room, I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall. Felt like forever. Then the heater kicked on, rattling like crazy. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Actually, I turned it off. There wasn't a single excuse in the world for what I'd heard. No apology could ever fix what was broken. But the worst part, and this is the part I really hate myself for, was that tiny sliver of hope left inside me. Some pathetic little voice kept whispering that maybe I'd misheard, that they were just kidding, that I was just exhausted and imagining things. I wasn't wrong. But that hurt even more than the whole betrayal thing. Instead of crying, I grabbed that notepad, those flimsy, cheap pages, and started writing. It wasn't about making sense of it, it was just about getting through it. Writing didn't make the pain go away, but it gave it a form, you know. And having a form, that felt like having some control. The next morning felt like trying to walk through mud. I checked out of that crummy place just after sunrise and hopped on the first train back to Providence. I didn't go straight home, though. I walked into this little coffee shop a couple blocks away, got a coffee I didn't even touch, and just sat there looking out the window for half an hour. All I could think about was him. Did he really mean what he said? Or was the whole thing just some cruel act for Grant's benefit? By the time I got back home, I didn't even care anymore. Silas wasn't there. No surprise, really. He had boys' night penciled in on his calendar for the whole weekend. Everything inside was exactly how I left it. Pillows all neat, a candle half burned, and those flowers on the table all droopy. I tossed my coat over the railing and went straight to the office. If he thought I'd be too upset to look into things, well, he'd forgotten who he married. I fired up the laptop, went to our joint bank account, and started checking things. The usual stuff was their groceries, Netflix, that sort of thing. Then I saw a big dinner bill in Grant's name from a few days before. And then I saw it. Under loans, a $30,000 personal loan approved 2 months ago in my name. My heart sank. I opened the document, scrolled down to the signature, and just stared. It was my name, my handwriting, or it should have been. But it was too perfect, too neat, too darn round. Like someone had practiced it 100 times on lined paper. I never signed that loan. I started breathing really fast. I checked the approval email, it went straight to my account. Whoever did this had complete access to everything. Our bank accounts, my email, even my tax stuff. It hit me harder than any anger ever could. It was a betrayal, and the proof was right there in black and white. My chest felt like it was going to explode, so I started printing everything, every loan, every email, every single date. I organized it all into folders and made extra copies on a flash drive. Even my students faked papers better than this. I went into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, but just left it there. I needed a break, so I grabbed my phone and scrolled through social media, more out of habit than anything else. But then I saw a photo. There was Silas at some fancy table, Grant was right next to him, and a bunch of other people I sort of knew. They were all laughing, frozen in that moment, sparkling wine halfway to their lips. The caption said, "Freedom tastes sweet. No chains, fresh start, cheers to this." People were commenting with fire emojis and inside jokes. No one even mentioned me. Not a single person asked, "Where's Rowena?" I put the phone down so slowly. For a second I let myself think back to our wedding day. I heard my mom's voice in my head giving her speech. She said, "Love means sticking together, especially when things get tough." I'd cried then, feeling so lucky to be marrying Silas. He'd promised, "You'll never go through anything alone." And now here I was, printing out proof of his lies while he was off celebrating his freedom. Nah, I wasn't going to call him. Not just yet. This wasn't about proving he lied, this was about building a wall. A really, really high wall. So when I finally walked away, it wouldn't just be emotionally over. It would be legally done, financially settled, completely over and done with. That afternoon, I slipped the USB drive into my grandma's old jewelry box. It had a secret compartment she kept her will in there. Seemed like the perfect hiding spot. Right before the sun went down, my phone buzzed. Silas. I just stared at the screen, watching those seconds tick by. His voicemail started playing, all breezy and unconcerned. "Hey babe," he said, "haven't heard from you. Figured you'd be back by now, call me." Click, I listened to it over and over, maybe 5 times. Sleep, forget about it. Even after I turned everything off, my brain wouldn't shut up. Around 3 a.m., I was sitting on the floor of the guest room, legs crossed, surrounded by old photo albums. Those giant, heavy things from way back when. I told myself I was just trying to clear my head, you know, but really I was hunting for something, some kind of proof. Something to back up what my gut had been screaming at me for ages. Then it hit me. One picture jumped out. Our engagement party. There we were, all smiles and bubbly. But in the back there was Claire, Silas's ex. She hadn't stuck around long that day. Just one drink, some super awkward small talk, then poof, gone without even a goodbye. Back then I'd bought her headache story. But now this other memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought of in years. She'd pulled me aside near the coat rack and whispered, Hey, just keep your finances separate, okay? I'd laughed, figured she was just being a bit catty. She gave me this tight little smile and then left. Back then, I figured it was just plain old jealousy. Looking back, maybe it was a heads up. Silas texted me that morning. My folks want to do brunch, you in? It was so breezy, like he hadn't pulled a fast one on me or made a fool of me in front of his brother. I almost just blew it off, but then I remembered that playing nice got me what I needed. And what I needed was power. The restaurant was one of those fancy places that everyone loved. It smelled like expensive perfume and burnt caramel. I wore black. Grant was already there, with that stupid grin that just got under my skin. Silas's parents arrived a few minutes later. Marjorie kissed me like everything was totally fine, and his dad, Barry, gave me a quick hug while he was checking his phone. I barely ate anything. About halfway through it started. Marjorie looked at me and asked, "You seem stressed lately, sweetie." "Work stuff," I mumbled. Before I could say anything else, Grant laughed. "She's always overthinking things, you know how she is." Barry piped up, still looking at his phone. Silas said she's been stressed. Maybe some things are just being blown out of proportion. I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. Misunderstood. Grant leaned in close. "You ever think you're making a bigger deal out of things than they are?" I stared at him, trying not to let my hands shake. Under the table in my purse was a copy of the loan approval. His name was on one of the receipts they used to get the loan. I knew he didn't have a clue I was onto him, so I smiled. I felt so small, so numb, like nothing had even happened. It was crazy, acting like I cared while I was really just seething inside. Marjorie dropped another little bomb right before dessert. Silas said I'd been acting distant. He said it hurt him, which, honey, it was a knife twisting. He's really trying, you know. My neck burned, but I kept my cool. "You're right," I said. "He is trying." The silence afterwards. They totally heard the anger hiding under my calm voice. After brunch, I went straight to Camille's. She answered the door in sweats and a towel, looking like she'd just gotten out of the shower. "You look like you need a drink," she said. "Or maybe a crowbar, or both." I sat down, and I just told her everything. The loan, the picture, that awful forged signature, the whole brunch thing. The works. Camille didn't even blink. She just leaned back and said, "Rowena, they've been messing with your head for years. This isn't new, you're finally seeing the truth." And that's when the tears came. Not a sobbing mess, just quiet, steady tears soaking into her pillow while she rubbed my back. "You're not crazy," she whispered. "You're just seeing the whole picture now." By the time the sun went down, I was calm enough to plan my next move. I made 3 sets of copies, digital and printed, everything time-stamped. One went into Camille's safe, another into my locked office drawer at school. The third, I hid it in the back of an old copy of Wuthering Heights on our bookshelf. Silas never reads anything like that. Just as I put the book back, my phone buzzed. Another message, another act. But this time, I just couldn't listen to any more of it. I already knew everything I needed to know about him. I decided before the sun even peeked over the horizon. No dramatic blow-up, no yelling, just the quiet sound of a zipper closing. Silas had already gone to the gym with Grant, planning on brunch afterward. It was peaceful in the house, still a little dark from the early morning light. I stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at my open suitcase on the bed. It had been ages since I'd packed for anything besides a quick work trip or visiting family, but this was different. This time, I wasn't the one leaving. I was claiming my space again. I picked out my items methodically. The green sweater from that trip to Vermont. Mine. The scarf my sister gave me. Also mine. I didn't even glance at the drawer with our shared winter gloves. I left the anniversary quilt folded there at the end of the bed. Not because I cared, but because it didn't matter. I reached under the bed for the jewelry box with the secret compartment. The USB drive was still sitting there next to it. My grandmother's silver watch, the one I wore when we got married. I put it on my wrist right away. Some things are yours, you know. As I went through the house, I took back pieces of myself. Not everything, though, just enough. I took my framed diplomas from the hallway but left the family picture from the Bahamas. I cleaned out my stuff from the bathroom cabinet but left my toothbrush. I wanted Silas to see what was missing, to feel how empty things were without me. This wasn't about vanishing. This thing was straight up designed to mess with me. I reached for my journal, the one I kept by my bed. It wasn't there. I looked again, really dug around in the drawer. Nope. My stomach just sank. That journal, it wasn't just some diary. It had all my messy feelings, my hopes, the times I blew up when I was all alone. I went through the whole house, quiet as a mouse. Finally, I found it in Silas's office, shoved in his desk drawer under a folder called Passive Income Ideas. I couldn't believe it as I looked through it. Pages were ripped out, some shoved back and all out of order. Whole entries had red pen all over them. One page even had a sticky note that said, "Ask Grant if this market exists." He'd actually used my most private fears, my own pain, to come up with ideas for a side gig. I didn't even shed a tear, not this time. I went back upstairs, put the journal on the bed, and just stared at it for what felt like forever. Then I shoved it in my backpack and zipped it up. The sound of it echoed in the quiet. I didn't leave a note, no big dramatic speech. Just a yellow sticky note on the fridge with "Don't call" and my keys. I hid them behind the spice rack, right where I knew no one else would bother to look. The mailbox was already taken care of. My nameplate was gone last week because I told the post office I was forwarding my mail. It wasn't temporary, though. With everything ready to go, I sat in the living room one last time. No music, no TV, just me, alone with the silence. It used to feel calm, you know. Now it just sounded like being ignored. The car showed up early, 5 minutes before the scheduled time. I lugged out 2 suitcases, a backpack, and all the stuff I used to associate with that house. As we drove off, I glanced back in the mirror. The porch light was doing that flickering thing again, just like when we first moved in. Silas promised he'd take care of it that same night. He kissed me and said, "It's ours now." I remember how that felt, but now it was just his. I hoped that flickering light would mess with his head. Camille opened the door before I even knocked. "Wine or whiskey?" she asked. "Wine," I said. We sat on her couch, my bag still sitting there. She poured us both a glass, handed me one, and just waited. "Do you want to talk?" she asked. I took a slow drink, staring at the floor. "Not yet," I told her, "but soon." After I put my luggage down beside Camille's couch and finished that wine, I started deleting stuff from my phone. Shopping lists, voice memos about books I never got around to, reminders to buy dog food even though we never got one. Just digital junk. That's when I saw the recorder app was still open, a red bar flashing at the top. Without even thinking, I tapped it. The file was just labeled with a date and time. The day I showed up with the cake, I hit play. At first it was just background noise, dishes clinking, muffled laughter, the blender whirring. Then the voices started. Grant said she'll never leave. She's too proud. Then, let her stay. So there I was, all puffed up and broke as a joke. I had this plan to slowly bleed her dry and she wouldn't even see it coming. Then this laugh. Loud like I owned the world, a sound I knew too well. My hands were steady, my jaw didn't even twitch. I just stared at the wall, listening to my own voice fill the room. It wasn't some stupid misunderstanding, this was all planned. Brutal, cold, and sick. I hit stop and made 3 copies. One in the cloud, one on my laptop in a secret folder, and I emailed myself a fourth. The truth, plain and simple. When I walked into the kitchen, Camille looked up from washing dishes. "You okay?" she asked. I handed her my phone. "Listen to this." She listened once, no questions. Then again, real slow. She didn't even blink, just stared until it was over. "He said that to his brother," she finally said. "About you." I just nodded. "You need a lawyer," she said. "Now, not later." I nodded again. While she made coffee, I sat at the counter searching for lawyers online. I didn't need some big shot drama queen, just someone good, quiet, smart, and strategic. That afternoon, I drove to Springfield. My parents' place still smelled like lemon furniture polish and Sunday dinners. My mom opened the door, that worried, tight-lipped look she always gets when someone starts crying at a family gathering. I hugged her longer than I meant to. She didn't ask anything, just took me to the kitchen, made tea, and waited. "I need you to hear this," I said. She looked at my dad, then back at me. I pressed play. My mom went completely white. My dad didn't move a muscle until the recording ended. He just got up and walked away without a word, vanished into the hall. A second later, he was back, carrying an old lockbox, and plopped it on the table. He said, "I used these guys back when my business partner tried to screw me over on some land in 03, and flipped open a leather folder. They're quiet, but they get the job done if they have to." My mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, baby." I think that hurt more than everything, the fact that I'd gone through it all by myself, because I chose to, out of shame, out of being scared, out of enough is enough. The next morning I made the call. Shelley Marks, attorney, I got an appointment for Thursday. When I tried to pay for the retainer myself, my dad cut me off with a look. "You gave that man 7 years, you don't owe him anything else." I didn't argue for once. That night I was in Camille's guest room, curled up with my laptop. I wasn't looking through his financials or obsessing over anything. I was just breathing slowly on purpose. Then I checked my email. There was one new message. It said, "Where the hell are you? You're making me look bad." No hello, nothing about caring. It was just about his reputation. I just stared at the screen for a whole minute before I closed the lid. Good. The alert chimed in right after breakfast. I was at Camille's counter pouring coffee when my phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. Loan verification status delayed due to missing documents. I stopped pouring. Missing documents? No way. It all went in 2 days prior, both online and on paper, courtesy of Shelley's own paralegal. I clicked on the alert fast, glancing over the unclear update before I dialed Shelley's office. Her assistant connected me straight away. "They're stalling us," Shelley said, her tone sharp. "Your verification request, somehow it didn't even get put in the review queue." I made sure I followed up myself. Apparently someone on their risk management team had tossed it into internal review. My stomach lurched. Internal review, someone who could pull some strings was slowing it down. "Grant, probably," she said flat out. "He used to be a finance guy, right?" I nodded, my jaw clenched. "At 2 different banks. Well, he's a pro at causing roadblocks without leaving a trace." I could hear her fingers flying on her keyboard. "But listen, Rowena, we're not giving up. I've been in worse scrapes with people playing it clean." I leaned against the counter, watching Camille's dog passed out in the sun by the sliding door. "So we fight harder," I mumbled. "That's the exact attitude I need," Shelley said back. "Don't back down, that's when they get cocky." That warning echoed in my head later that night when the doorbell rang. Camille was in the kitchen cooking pasta, the house filled with the smell of garlic and something warm. I looked through the window and froze. Silas. He stood on the porch wearing a crumpled hoodie, holding a half-empty bottle hidden in his coat. His eyes were all red and he was swaying a bit. Camille opened the door before I could say anything. "I just want to talk to her," Silas mumbled, his words all messed up. "She won't pick up." "Because she doesn't want to talk," Camille said, her voice steady but serious. "Not now. She's still my wife," he insisted. That's when I stepped out from behind Camille. "No, Silas. You gave that up the night you and Grant cooked up that insurance thing." He looked at me real quick. "You don't get it." He twisted my words around. I tilted my head. "He recorded it." Silas blinked, confused. "What? Never mind," I told him. "You need to go." He stumbled a step forward. "You still love me. This can't be how it ends." Camille held up her phone and hit record. It beeped, loud and clear. "You're drunk, you're not here to talk. You're here to mess with things," she said. He turned to her. "Is this some kind of trick? You think you're better than me?" I stepped aside and pointed down the hall. "You have 10 seconds to leave before we call the cops." He gave a harsh, broken laugh. "You think you're gonna win? Think that recording means something? I made you." I walked past him slow and sure, then locked myself in the guest room without another word. The next morning, I started the paperwork for a restraining order. Camille helped me write it all out, sipping her second cup of coffee, the smell of hazelnut and strength filling the room. I emailed the audio to Shelley and stashed a copy in the cloud, in a folder I called Escalations. This wasn't about making things right anymore, it was about damage control. As I put my signature on the final paper, it hit me. Silas wasn't sorry, he was terrified. And that made him way more dangerous, not less. Around lunchtime there was another voicemail, this time it was Grant. "You're gonna regret this," he hissed, his voice dripping poison. "You think you're some kind of hero, just wait and see what happens." I listened to it twice, saved it, and tagged it as evidence number 2. Then I fired up my own recording app and hit record. My voice was calm and steady. "This is Rowena March. If anything happens to me, my lawyer has copies of everything." This was me taking charge. I glanced at Camille, standing there in the doorway, arms crossed, giving me this knowing look. It was time they saw what I was really capable of. I hadn't planned to check my messages that morning, but when my phone buzzed on Camille's counter, and a name I hadn't seen in ages popped up, I had to stop. The text was quick to the point from Monica, who used to work with Silas. "Don't tell anyone you heard it from me, but something's going down at his firm. Look at the HR bulletin today." I logged onto my laptop. The internal memo was already making the rounds online. It was a formal announcement about an investigation into some shady stuff, money missing, unauthorized access to client accounts, and fudged paperwork. Silas's name wasn't in the title, but the details were totally him. It was all his business, his best clients, even his dates. I just sat there, staring at the computer screen, then slumped back. Suddenly, Camille's apartment felt totally different, not safe anymore, more like we were in the middle of a battle. Something had changed, the air was thick with it. He was falling apart. Later that day, I heard Camille let out a little gasp from the other room. She opened an email and stopped dead. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't say anything for a minute, just turned her laptop so I could see. Back off, she said. You're way in over your head, you're not some superhero, G. Grant. He'd emailed her, straight up threatening her, but he didn't get it. He never figured Camille wasn't like me. She didn't even think twice. She already had her cop buddy's number on speed dial. In no time at all, she'd sent both the voicemail and the email to Detective Miller, the same one who'd helped her with the restraining order. Before sunset, they'd officially started looking into Grant's threats. She let out a huge breath after hitting send. That guy thinks everyone's chicken, she said. Not this time. I just nodded. They thought staying quiet meant we were weak. Camille raised her glass. Let's show them otherwise, she said. The next day, she filed a formal complaint with the state bar. She included the recording of Silas's drunken visit, along with Grant's email. Camille's statement was solid, calm, completely undeniable. No drama, just the straight facts. So I ended up talking to this lady from HR at Sila's firm. They'd been calling me, wanting to know more about some stuff in Grant's client logs. Seems like someone had noticed things weren't adding up weeks earlier, but the audio recording I gave them was what finally pushed them over the edge. This HR woman, she really stressed that this could mess up way more than just his job depending how far this all went. You know, I just told her, yeah, I get it. Do what you need to do. Revenge wasn't even on my mind anymore. I just craved some answers, some control, the truth. And as things got more intense, things started to click into place. Camille had this old friend, an accountant, who looked up Grant's name in public records. She found him tied to a bunch of tax accounts that had red flags all over them. The second she mentioned his offshore accounts, my whole world felt like it was about to crumble. They thought they'd hidden everything so well that nobody would ever look. That night, Camille sent all the evidence to a group that helps women with legal stuff. Within an hour, I was on a Zoom call with a lawyer who does pro bono work on cases about financial abuse. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I didn't feel alone. I was sitting at Camille's kitchen table, surrounded by dirty coffee cups and files, with this legal webinar playing in the background. I wasn't even paying attention to it, though. I was just looking out the window into the night, and for once, it didn't feel like the darkness was staring back at me. Then the doorbell rang. It was after 10, and Camille looked worried. Expecting anyone? She asked, a little concerned. I slowly shook my head and rose to my feet. I opened the door and there he was, Silas, but this wasn't the Silas who mumbled sweet nothings or sent those awful guilt-trip texts. This Silas was clear-eyed, put together, icy. You ruined my life, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. No, I said, keeping my voice even, you lit the fuse. He just kept staring at me, a look of pure venom in his eyes. Then he just turned and walked down the steps. Camille closed the door. He's getting desperate, she said. I know, I whispered, and I have one more move. I hit send on the email to my lawyer and then placed my phone face down on the table. It was done. No more overthinking. No more second-guessing myself. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The next week began like any other. Until Tuesday morning. A message popped up from an old coworker of Silas's, someone we used to go on double dates with years ago. It was short and to the point. Check the news. I clicked the link she sent and immediately froze. Silas had been put on leave from his job pending an internal investigation. His smiling photo from the firm's website was now next to a headline that screamed, Audit reveals irregularities in client financial records. A few lines down, the article mentioned an anonymous tip that kicked off the whole audit. I didn't need a crystal ball to know who filed that report. I'd only sent the paperwork to HR the week before. I scrolled down further. His work laptop was gone, access revoked, comments refused. Silas wasn't the only name mentioned, either. Grant's was there, too. Even though he was out on his own now, his past still linked back to those cases that had raised red flags, and the feds were looking into it. I couldn't exactly say I was celebrating, but I did feel validated. Like I wasn't losing it. I wasn't making a big deal out of nothing. I was right about all of it. Later that day, Camille sent me an email she'd gotten in her personal inbox. It just said, enough. The body of the message went on, saying back off. You're next. You think you're so clever, but you're playing a dangerous game. You're going to lose Grant. But Camille had already looped in a friend who was in law enforcement. She didn't respond or even react really. She just slapped that email into the case file, then tacked on the voicemail he'd left her the week before. Within a day, a detective reached out to Camille. They were broadening the investigation to include threats and intimidation. I just stared at my phone after she texted me what was happening. He's going down faster than we thought, she wrote. Let's keep pushing. The next day, Camille officially filed her own formal complaint against Grant. Her statement was incredibly calm, well put together, and totally effective. I looked it over before she turned it in. It said, I am not afraid of you. I am not alone and I will not be silent. I wanted to cheer her on, but more than that, I wanted to do the same thing. That afternoon, I got a call from Silas's company. Their HR person asked if I could give them more details about the stuff I'd already sent in, especially the timeline. I did, and when I hung up, I told them, do what you need to do, I already have. Things were really moving by Thursday. This amazing women's legal group, Camille had hooked me up with, was getting ready to release a statement about my case. They were offering all this free help, to take all the emails, texts, recordings, and bank stuff I'd collected and make it into something a prosecutor could actually use. I was sitting in Camille's living room, sipping some tea, watching my whole life get turned upside down, but somehow I stayed strong. I didn't cry. I didn't even crack a smile, I just breathed. Then Friday night hit. The doorbell rang at my parents' place just after 7. I'd been crashing there, since I was working from home. My dad answered, then stepped aside, and there was Silas standing in the hallway. He wasn't freaking out, he wasn't all broken up. He just looked icy. You destroyed my life, he said, real flat. I got up from the table, walked to the doorway, and stopped a few feet away from him. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. You gave me the match. For a second, it looked like he might say something else, but he didn't. He turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Some endings aren't about everything being tied up in a neat little bow. They're about new beginnings. I didn't go far, just far enough. Just enough to start over without losing myself. My new apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine. It's a second-floor walk-up near the Providence River, with these floors that squeak like crazy, and just enough sunlight to make mornings feel like a fresh start. Finally, the last of the boxes were empty. I pulled out the tea mugs, Mom's cookbook, and my old classroom calendar still marked with Silas's chicken scratch reminders. I wiped them out one by one, not because I was mad but because I was letting go. Those first few weeks were like learning to breathe again. I'd sit on my little balcony in the mornings with coffee and a blanket, smelling that nice river air. I'd grade papers, watch the kids walk to school, and just teach without feeling like I was being watched and judged all the time. At home, I smiled more. I laughed at silly things. I started journaling again, not just to get through it, but to actually understand. Camille stopped by one night, a bottle of wine in one hand and her laptop in the other. Grant's name is all over the local news, she said, throwing her bag on the couch. Fraud case is out in the open, you should see the comments. I didn't ask to see them. I didn't need any of that drama. But I was so glad to have her there, and for that quiet, which had been a lot more meaningful than all the arguments I tried to dodge. You know, Camille said as we poured the wine, the way you dealt with this, it speaks volumes, it's strength. I just nodded. Most days it didn't feel strong. She gave me a gentle smile. That's exactly why it was. A couple of Saturdays later, I was at the farmer's market downtown. The smells of fresh basil, sourdough, and oranges were amazing. It was all so peaceful until I saw him, Silas. He was by a food stall, skinnier than I recalled, his hair a mess. He was all alone, no one with him, no phone glued to his hand. He looked older, not just older, but like he'd been through hell. Our eyes met for a second. He gave a little nod, kind of shy. I hope you're doing okay, I thought. I am, I said, and I really meant it. He just walked away. No explanations, no drama, and I was so grateful for that. Later that night, I was on the balcony, all wrapped up in a blanket with my journal. I wrote a letter I knew I'd never send. You messed with my head, I wrote, made me doubt everything, my memories, my gut feelings, even my sanity. And then I added, after a long pause, but I survived, and that's what really matters. I ripped the page out and burned it in an old dish. I watched the flames eat it up, turning it to ash, and for once I felt completely at peace. Weeks went by. Life went back to its normal beat. I started teaching a new unit at school on resilience. We read books about overcoming hard times in English class. One day, a student raised her hand. Ms. Hart, she asked, do you think you can really start over after something awful happens? I smiled. Yeah, I said, but you won't be exactly the same person, and that's okay. The class was quiet for a minute, and it was like something just clicked inside me. I knew then, for sure, that everything I'd gone through had changed me, but it wouldn't define who I was. Sometimes, the people who say they love you the most are the ones who are most scared of you being free. Man, it's crazy how losing everything can make you see that some folks never really gave you anything worthwhile in the first place. That night, like so many others recently, I ended up with my tea, a pen, and Mom's old recipe book. I tucked the last USB drive into it, right where the family banana bread recipe used to be. It wasn't about getting back at anyone or keeping memories anymore. This was about making my own future. You know, sometimes you need a real knockdown, drag out storm to figure out who wasn't there for you all along. And sometimes, walking away. That's not weak, it's the first big step to getting better. Rowena didn't fight to get even, she fought for her freedom. That's probably the quiet truth behind a whole bunch of stories we never hear about. A lot of times, being strong looks like just being calm and quiet and peace. That's the loudest win of them all. What would you have done in her place? Ever had to choose yourself, even when it really, really hurt? I've been there.